Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're tracking the epic, centuries-long biography of one single ancient Hebrew word. It's a word that literally shaped the bedrock of two major world religions and quietly influenced the lives of billions. Okay, so here is the irresistible mystery we're tackling today. How on earth do you translate a single concept that perfectly merges love, unwavering loyalty, and demanding justice all at the exact same time? Translators and scholars have basically pulled their hair out over this for centuries. Pinning it down to just one English equivalent, it's almost impossible. Well, meet Chesed. It's a profound term that shows up nearly 250 times in the Hebrew Bible. But here's the thing you've got to understand right out of the gate. Chesed is absolutely not some passive, fleeting feeling. We aren't talking about sentimental romance here. It was the active, binding glue of the ancient world. It is a completely dynamic, justice-infused loyalty that actually sustained these massive, earth-shattering agreements between the divine and humanity.
Section 1. The Grammar of the Covenant.
To really feel the weight of this word, we have to look at its role in ancient covenants. As scholar O. Palmer Robertson defines it, a covenant was a bond in blood sovereignly administered. So we're not talking about a polite handshake or a casual modern contract. This was a serious, divinely initiated bond. And within that immense framework, Chesed was the lifeblood. It was the mutually obligating language that kept that entire relationship functioning. If we trace this along the historical timeline, you can see it build progressively over centuries. You start in the patriarchal era with the Abrahamic covenant, which was a unilateral binding promise. Then, moving into the Exodus era, you get the Sinaitic covenant, rooted heavily in deliverance and relational law. Finally, the monarchic era brings the Davidic covenant, promising faithfulness to a royal line. And through all of those successive eras, Chesed is the constant thread setting the rules of engagement. When we look closely at its nature and source, it becomes clear that Chesed doesn't just spring up from human goodwill. It actually originates directly from a sovereign God. It's deeply relational, highly action-oriented, and serves as a direct reflection of divine character. And because of that, its function goes way beyond just one-sided generosity. It doesn't just sit there as a static promise. It actually sets the absolute gold standard for human ethical conduct. Because God extends Chesed, humanity is obligated to respond in kind, treating their neighbors with that exact same steadfast, loyal action.
Section 2. The Prophetic Call to Justice.
But of course, history rolls on, and human nature kicks in. Enter the ancient prophets, who literally weaponize this word to cut straight through the hypocrisy of their leaders. Take Hosea, for example. He delivers this absolutely devastating critique, saying, "For I desire steadfast love," that's Chesed, "and not sacrifice." He's proving a massive point here. God desires genuine relational loyalty over empty religious theater. The prophets drew a stark line in the sand. Empty rituals and festive temple sacrifices on one hand versus actual communal justice on the other. Prophets fiercely condemned leaders who would participate in temple worship while simultaneously exploiting the poor. They made it clear that those religious rituals are completely meaningless without actual ethical action. Guys like Amos and Micah made it undeniably clear that Chesed is inseparable from two other huge concepts: mishpat, meaning justice, and tzedakah, meaning righteous deeds. Chesed is not just private piety that you keep to yourself, it's a public virtue. It demands concrete, tangible protection for the marginalized, the widow, and the orphan. Simply put, if it doesn't result in justice, it isn't Chesed. Section 3. Lost and Found in Translation. Okay, so here is the ultimate plot twist in our word's biography. Fast forward to the 3rd and 2nd centuries BCE. The Hebrew text crashes headfirst into the Hellenistic world. Scholars are translating the Hebrew Bible into Greek to create the Septuagint, and they hit a wall. How do you say Chesed in Greek? Well, out of 245 occurrences, they overwhelmingly chose the word elios, meaning pity or mercy, an astounding 213 times. And this seemingly small linguistic choice created immense friction. You have the original Hebrew Chesed, which carries this heavy, mutual, covenantal obligation demanding justice and loyalty. Then you have the Greek elios, which leans heavily toward unilateral divine pity and a compassionate disposition. Rendering it mostly as pity, captured the mercy, sure, but it subtly neutered that radical, action-oriented demand for mutual justice. Looking at the historical data for these translations, you can see this wasn't just some academic exercise. This transition permanently shaped the theological discourse of the entire Greek-speaking world, completely altering how early audiences understood the very nature of divine love.
Furthermore, as the text moves into the New Testament era, a new Greek term takes center stage, agape. But importantly, agape doesn't erase the old covenant concept of chesed. Instead, it steps in to represent a transcendent, unconditional love that is seen as fulfilling those ancient covenantal promises. Section 4. A legacy in two faiths.
Following this linguistic fracture, our ancient word's legacy definitely doesn't fade away. It branches out, powerfully shaping the theological bedrock of two major world religions. Within traditional Judaism, the interpretive journey of Chesed sparks a rich, continuous conversation. You've got scholars from Rashi's literal historical analysis in the Middle Ages, all the way to Maimonides' philosophical synthesis, constantly applying these timeless principles to everyday interpersonal conduct. Modern scholar John D. Levinson highlights something truly profound about how this works in times of crisis. He describes Chesed as a mutual faithfulness, a belief in a God whose covenantal love remains steadfast, even when it is not empirically felt. It's this exact covenantal anchor that sustained the Jewish people through periods of unimaginable historical suffering, providing hope when things looked completely bleak.
Conversely, early Christian theologians developed a Christological lens. Looking back at the Old Testament through that Greek translation, they viewed the entire narrative as pointing to Jesus Christ. Within this framework, he is interpreted as the ultimate living embodiment of God's ancient Chesed, the true fulfillment of those promises made to Abraham, Moses, and David.
In this Christian framework, the inauguration of the New Covenant takes that steadfast love and expands its scope from a national focus to a universal one for all nations. It transcends the Mosaic law for a personal relationship, empowering the ethical life of the believer through Spirit-poured agape in their daily lives. Section 5, the ultimate relational language. So, we finally arrive at the resolution of our etymological epic. What started as an untranslatable Hebrew concept journeyed through empires, languages, and millennia. Ultimately, Chesed is the theological linchpin holding the entire biblical narrative together. It is the indispensable bridge between the sacred and the secular. Whether it's guiding Jewish halakhic law or anchoring Christian grace, Chesed remains the defining grammar for how the divine interacts with humanity and, crucially, how humanity must interact with itself. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on. We've seen that throughout history, this word absolutely refused to let people settle for empty religious rituals. If true love cannot exist in a vacuum without justice, if it requires actual, tangible, loyal action toward the vulnerable, how will you speak the language of Chesed in your own life today?